we'll do a quick little video. We're going to go over some just basic husbandry. People are asking me various questions, and I guess it makes better sense to do it in a video. So, essentially, when we have, rack systems, we have a heating panel in the back. So you can see that back there. And basically, excuse me, what that does is it creates a hot spot for an animal that it uses that, it seeks it out as it's digesting itself. It uses that to optimize its metabolism and its immune response. So what I do is I keep, a room like this, I keep it at an ambient temperature, but then I provide some of the basics. And some of the basics are, obviously we want bedding. So the bedding, besides, basically absorbing, urine and waste or whatever, we want to keep the animal clean and dry, but, obviously not too dry. So basically, we're interested in like humidity. So my humidity in this room is probably easily 60%. That's outside the cage. When you start going inside the cage environments, it even gets more. So I have aspen right here. I use aspen as opposed to pine shavings. Pine shavings are incredibly dusty. So I have a water dish. So in the Freedom Breeders, I can basically just take this out. You can see my yellowish tainted water. That is actually iron in my water. And I let my water softener run out. Okay. So here we have, this is a palmetto corn snake. So this is almost, I guess we would say it's a lot like the cowrie tick. So we have, this is like a really, really appropriate setup for a corn snake like this. So this animal is just one of my little pets or projects or whatever you want to call it. So basically the animal back here, if it needs extra heat, it would burrow down here, and that's roughly where the heat panel goes this way, so that goes the length of the rack. So there's a hot spot. So the ambient in this room is easily I don't know, probably 84 degrees. And then this animal can easily get back there and get, 88, 90 degrees. I use the paper to provide a nice hide spot. And one little trick is, so if you take the paper and you put it back here, you can take a defrosted mouse and you leave it there. And that makes life easy for that snake. And it makes it easy for you because you can, look who's watching us. What are you guys doing? So it makes things easy. So this snake right here, so when you see an animal like this animal is generally telling you, I want to eat. Excuse me, I'm recovering from being sick with this flu. So this animal right here, it's peeking its head out, and this is a good indication to me that if I put something there, that animal would eat. And once again, I have the same simple setup. It's just, simple but consistent, makes life easy to manage. I don't see anybody sticking out. So that blood python is burrowed down. So if I went and let's say I looked at these bloods, these guys, I just all right, so if we look at, so in this cage, I was wrong about my temperature. So in this cage it's about 80 degrees. In my ambient humidity, I just put this thing in there, so the humidity is going to start climbing. But you can easily have an 80% humidity. Another good rule. I have two snakes together. These two animals originate from different sources originally. So basically, sometime in their life, they grew up completely independent of each other. So the flora that's with this animal and the flora with this animal are completely different. That therefore means when I put them together and I give them a water dish, a common vessel where they're both drinking out of, as they go to the water dish and they investigate the water and they're drinking, they leave saliva and proteins and whatever, which basically is the enough to satisfy the needs of bacteria and stuff like that. And that water dish becomes literally a broth for bacteria. And we want to keep our waters clean, but if I visually look at the water and I physically say, oh, that's clean, that doesn't mean anything. Biologically it's terrible. So whenever you touch a water dish and you're feeling inside it, and you feel any kind of slipperiness, those are proteins. That's basically bacteria and stuff like that. So that isn't clean. So a really good idea is if you have animals from different sources, it originated from different places, don't give them a water dish together. That's a really, really good idea. Look at these. We just like to look at them. such a cool animal. That's a, see, these are boneless pythons. They're just hanging out and staring. Let's see, what else could I possibly look at? I have been playing a lot in this room because it's really nice to enjoy my new Freedom Breeder racks. And it just, you know, you get in here and you start monkeying around with things. And this guy's eating. That's the king cobra. All right. Yeah, I just like to look at them. What else can I talk about? Okay, so basically, a lot of pythons, hot spots. I like my ball pythons, I like to do hot spots of 94, 95 degrees. So that's where the animal actually would go to the hot spot in the cage, which is usually in the back of the cage, sit against the surface, the bottom of the cage, and basically heat up. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to raise their core temperatures. And their core temperatures, they'll often maybe only get, you know, maybe 88, 91 degrees. Even though there's a hot spot of 95, it's very hard to transfer that 95 degrees completely to the animal's core temperature. So even though there's a surface temperature of 95 degrees, the animal's going to go there. Its thermal, you know, ability to basically heat up its mass from that hot spot is definitely going to be reduced beyond the 95 degrees. So those things to consider. And so with most pythons, ambient temperatures on the low side, 82, 84 is really a good idea. Realize this: when I'm feeding snakes and they've ingested a meal, basically, we'll peek in here. He's eating. So when they've ingested a meal, within a couple days, you know, the metabolism is really kicking in. The digestion is basically in there, and that animal can easily go up 4 or 5 degrees. So if I'm keeping an animal in an environment, let's say 82 or 84 degrees, and we add, you know, 5 degrees, you know, that could be, you know, closer to 90 degrees. And if you don't give that animal any place to escape because you've trapped it in a cage, let's say if I raise the ambient temperature, let's say like 86, 88. So that means the air temperature. So if I were to basically take a temp gun. Okay, so right here, I'm looking at the temp gun. So my temperature, remember we just looked at something where it said 79 was my air temperature? So we're basically like that. So that is the ambient. That is literally the temperature of this water dish. You must understand that. That's ambient air temperature. So if the animal were to crawl off that and sit over here, it's going to cool down. When it wants to heat up and basically act like a cold-blooded animal, it's going to go to the back. There's a heat panel that is a source of heat. They'll go over there, they'll heat up as they need, and once they come up to temperature, they'll crawl away, and they basically go back and forth, and that's thermal regulation. But if I were to take this and put it into a cage with very little ventilation, and I put a heat source on it, and I cause the ambient temperature, if I got this ambient temperature, let's say 86 degrees, then when I were to feed this animal a meal, as it's digesting that meal, its core temperature is going to start rising. So if I put it, let's say that, you know, core temperatures, you know, 86, 88 degrees, that's over 91 degree temperature equivalent once the animal is basically digesting. That can be a problem. Sometimes what the animals will do, they'll throw up, they'll regurgitate. You get something called pancreatitis, where we basically overwhelm the system of the animal. So we give it a very large food item, and there's a huge amount of energy required for these guys to digest. So as they're digesting, they are basically utilizing stored energy, you know, and fat, and also, you know, actually from the process of digestion, there's also, you know, energy there, but a lot of it comes from what they already have stored. So that's a huge burden on their system. So if you take and you heat them up too much, and let's say, you know, it says the snake's digesting it, and it has a core temperature of 91 degrees, that may not be comfortable. Certainly for a blood python, it's not. So that's a great way. I feed it, you know, this meal. Within a couple days, it's digesting, it starts bloating, it's gassing up. It's probably very uncomfortable. And then I heat the animal up,
you're basically going to ensure that this animal is going to have a real problem. It's often going to throw up, or what it does is it only partially digests its meal. Maybe it still throws up, or when it defecates, it's not fully utilized. And when they get something called pancreatitis, you're overwhelming the system, and you'll find out there's a lot of fat. There's a lot of really nasty stuff in the cage after they've processed it, and that's because you've overwhelmed the digestive abilities of that animal, and you'll get like this really fatty, nasty, just sludge all over the cage, and that is pancreatitis. And that's just, you know, we did not manage the basic husbandry of that animal's cage. So, you know, I'm just basically putting out some basic information that sometimes people don't consider, especially if, you know, if you're just recently into snakes, or, you know, people that have been into snakes for, you know, a while. I'm just going to just throw out some of this dribble, and maybe to somebody it's kind of interesting. What do you say? You say you're cute. All right. Hopefully somebody's getting something out of my videos. Say goodbye.